Free agency has officially begun, and are the Washington Commanders buyers? Welcome to the Sidelines Washington Podcast, where we take command for the Sidelines Sports Network. I'm your host and head of NFL operations here, Parker Hamlett. And of course, this is the most exciting time of the year for us NFL fans, Washington Commanders fans. Free agency is finally here. And, presumably before the Carson Wentz trade, it looked as if the Washington Commanders were going to, in fact, be buyers, but that is not the case. This is normally the time of the year where all 32 NFL teams get some nice, fancy, shiny new toys or lose half their roster. We tend to be on the later half of that. But, of course, I'm joined by my co-host and host of the Kirby on Sports Podcast, Josh Kirby. Kirby, if you were to use one word to describe Washington's, free agency adventure thus far, what would that word be?
Yeah, limited. Very limited in their budget because of Carson Wentz. They picked up his entire contract, like we spoke about on last episode we recorded. Very limited on what the Commanders are able to do. They've been more selling, offloading cap. They cut Landon Collins. They got rid of his name's escaping me. He went to the Bills.
Ioannidis settled. And so far,
Tim settled,
I think
yes.
Landon's a post-one cut. I think they kind of reported that at first, but I think that's a post-one cut. I think so far it's Matthew Ioannidis. I think Tim Settle.
Tim Settle. That was a huge loss in my opinion. I really liked his performance. I've seen some film on him, watched him play. I thought he was really good. Ioannidis hurts too. I really enjoyed his style of gameplay for the Commanders as well. So to sum it up for you, Parker, they're very limited in what they can do because they have to release guys making more cap room because there's not much they can do in free agency.
I like the word limited, Josh, because I feel like that's the best word to describe the initial wave one of free agency so far. I mean, you look around the National Football League, everybody wants their team going like a Jacksonville Jaguars level spending spree. Everybody saw Christian Kirk get $84 million. Our own Brandon Scherff finally making his exodus from the Washington Commanders, joining the Jacksonville Jaguars. Everybody wants their team to splash in March, but that doesn't always equal results in February. And, kind of a tough reality being Commanders fans and covering the team like we do is that, a lot of these high marquee free agents just don't want to come to Ashburn, except for J.D. Mckissick. And we will definitely get into J.D. Mckissick today here on the Sidelines Washington Podcast. But if you're listening to us, as usual, thank you in the audio realm. Make sure you give us a subscribe, give us a follow, leave a rating or review. Even if it's just an emoji, just 2 seconds of your time. We greatly appreciate it. We got listeners from all across the globe. Shout out to the ones in California, especially. I see you guys representing. If you're watching us in the YouTube room, make sure you subscribe and click the bell to turn on notifications so you're notified of when the latest for Sidelines Washington drops, not only on the YouTube, but just on all platforms as well. We got the all 22 quarterback draft class video that just dropped. Appreciate all the interaction with that. I know quarterback is kind of in the rear view right now after the Carson Wentz acquisition, but Rivera and co are not outruling a quarterback at 11, even though it seems highly unlikely. But we're not here to talk about the draft, Josh. We're here to talk about free agency. And this week, probably one of the most exciting beginnings to a free agency, probably in offseason history, to be honest with you. I mean, just an absolute carousel. Devontae Adams is a Raider. Deshaun Watson is a Brown. I mean, we could sit here and talk about the headlines all day long. But we're going to talk Commanders first and foremost. And it can be a blockbuster type of season for some organizations, like we're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. But for the Commanders so far, it has been the opposite, lackluster. Really, like we said, Washington's never really been a popular destination by any sorts. I mean, Russell Wilson showed that himself. Rivera kind of has an uphill battle in that regard. But do you think it's time to finally shed this kind of illusion that Ron Rivera, the pedigree of him being the coach of the Washington Commanders, kind of allures people here? Because I feel like that was one thing that a lot of us kind of thought at the beginning of Rivera's, tenure as a coach, was that he was going to be able to kind of attract some of these higher profile free agents. And that just kind of hasn't happened yet, has it?
Yeah, I don't think Ron Rivera is as great as people might think in a way, and I'm not knocking that he isn't a good head coach, made it to Super Bowl 50. Unfortunately, did not get the job done against the Broncos. He's had some great seasons with the Panthers and ends up getting fired from the Panthers, moving over to Washington. And that was a great move, in my opinion. But I don't think Ron Rivera is in the class of coaching where a player is going to be like, I want to play for him. That it's not like you see with one person, an example, Bill Belichick. You've seen him and Brady tag team it for over 20 plus years before Brady moves to Tampa Bay. That's a coach, if I was a player, I'd want to play for, because he's top tier. And, the Patriots and the wild card got beat to all end against the Bills. But still, that's one coach I'd play for. I look at Ron Rivera, and if I was a player, I could handle working with Ron Rivera. He's a great head coach, but I don't think he's to the pedigree of some of these higher named coaches in the league like Bill Belichick.
Until you get the quarterback, though, man, none of it really matters. I mean, look at the Chargers. I mean, just a bunch of huge acquisitions for them. You've seen some of the stuff going on with the Raiders. I mean, it's an absolute arms race in the AFC. And then you see some of the decisions that have been made with the Rams as well. I mean, just desirable destinations when you've got that dynamic offense and that quarterback situation figured out. And to me, that's kind of why these higher echelon or upper echelon free agents like the Honey Badger, Marcus Williams, Bobby Wagner, it just makes me chuckle to see people even try to connect us with them. Sure, Bobby Wagner, middle linebacker, will be an absolutely phenomenal acquisition for the Washington Commanders. It would solve the position that we apparently solved in April of last year. Marcus Williams is a name we were tied to, but we were never in the running for any of those guys. I don't foresee us even being even close to the realm of the sweepstakes for a guy like the Honey Badger. You've been in Kansas City for a couple seasons. You're used to playing in those big time environments. There's levels to this stuff in the NFL, Josh. And I feel like right now the Commanders are like Virginia Tech. Great defense, but can't recruit offense to save their life. And I plenty of Tech fans listen to this podcast to know exactly what I'm talking about. And
they should have won. They should have beat Texas, Parker.
Well, I mean, okay, and with the whole quarterback thing, right? Russ chooses the Broncos not only because of the geographical reasons, but also, adults run that organization. I still feel like Washington has a lot of work to do. I feel like they've kind of laid some foundation to kind of strive towards the right direction. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they still have a long way to go in an uphill battle. And I mean, I put this down in the comments. If you are a free agent, why would you want to join the Commanders, right? I mean, sit here and really weigh the landscape. I'm not saying that we aren't redeemable. I'm not saying that there aren't some people that could come here. But, I mean, we kind of are like a get-right team in a sense. And a very quiet free agency so far for the Washington Commanders. A lot of it, of course, tied to, like we said, Carson Wentz. But I mean, if I'm one of these playmakers like an Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, neither one of those guys were guys that I thought would come here. But I mean, you look at Scott Turner, who's averaging 19 points per game, getting a multi-year extension with the Washington Commanders. I haven't seen enough out of Scott Turner to warrant him getting any type of extension with this organization. A lot of people can point to a lot of turnover at the quarterback position. I think it was 7 different starting quarterbacks for Rivera so far. How did you feel about the Scott Turner extension?
I feel like he needed to prove himself for one more season before a multi-year extension. The offense looked average, not great, in my opinion. Some people might disagree with that, but I feel like there could be more potential outside of Scott Turner. And I feel like Washington was too hesitant to explore that option. And they thought Scott Turner was the best available at this time. So they decided to lock him up. But
it's about nepotism, Josh. I think it's about Rivera wanting his guys around, the people that he's comfortable
with. That's true, too.
I think that's a big factor in this re-sign. I feel like there's a lot of moving pieces with this. and not all of it can be put on Scott Turner. But at the same time, at what point is it excuses? I mean, you've had Alex Smith in this offense, and when you did, I mean, they were doing enough to keep people in ball games. You know, there have been flashes, and I will say there have been multiple Sundays where Scott Turner's game plan was absolutely phenomenal, and some things were out of his control. But to warrant a multi-year extension before we even see Carson Wentz play a snap feels a little bit too knee-jerk, feels a little bit too soon for me. Like you said, I feel like he needed to prove himself at least for one more season with an adequate starting quarterback like Carson Wentz, presumably under center. But like I said, quiet free agency so far for the Washington Commanders, right? Took a vote on Twitter. We asked, you voted, does Washington have a good enough roster to have a quiet free agency? 83% of you say no. So, I mean, you know, last year we went on kind of like a spending spree, right? You know, here on Sidelines Washington, we graded the free agency class at the end of it. And I mean, when you kind of look at this class now in hindsight, you see that a lot of these guys were supposed to be multi-year things. Maybe with the exception of one, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's still a free agent currently. We got kind of threw a one-year flyer on him, $10 million deal. I mean, at the time, I didn't hate the move, didn't love the move, kind of felt like a cheap stopgap quarterback kind of move. You know, William Jackson III, March 16th, signed him. Curtis Samuel, street clothes. You know, that's a guy that we haven't really seen anything out of yet. And I remember when the fans were absolutely begging for Curtis Samuel to be in burgundy and gold. We also got Tyler Larson, Adam Humphries, DeAndre Carter, Bobby McCain. You know, you look at the quarterback position first and foremost, Josh. You know, out for the year. You know, when has Ryan Fitzpatrick ever gotten hurt in the first game of any season and been out for the whole year? Never. Kind of the outlier here. But now you have also what is actually deemed an injury-prone quarterback in Carson Wentz. And yes, Kirby, we are going to have this conversation because apparently people want to tell me that Carson Wentz is not injury-prone. I've not had what you would call, Josh, a PC Pro Commander verified, company approved type of reaction to the Carson Wentz move. And one of my sentiments, I claim that Carson Wentz was injury prone because Kirby, around the league, what is Carson Wentz perceived as? Injury prone. And, you know, a very popular Commanders content creator responded to me. And, you know, to his credit, my initial tweet was incorrect. I said Carson Wentz missed 5 out of the last 6 seasons, 7 in the last episode. I was incorrect, and I will say that first and foremost. And I did word that completely wrong. But Jordan, and yes, I'm talking to you, Jordan, I'm not going to sit here and dish you like a bunch of people like to do because quite frankly, I like a lot of your content. But you say that he only played, 4 games? He only missed, 4 games out of the last 3 seasons? Before coming to Philadelphia, Jordan, Carson only started 58 out of his 80 starts with the Eagles. And just to give you kind of an injury timeline with Carson Wentz, 2015, he broke his wrist. 2016 had a hairline fracture. 2017, he tore his ACL, MCL. 2018, stress fracture in his back. 2019 had a concussion, first postseason game. In 2022, he got hurt in his first preseason game. Sure, maybe that accumulates to 3 or 4 games over the last couple of years. But Carson Wentz's injury problems were on the forefront in Indianapolis to the point where they start 0-3, and they're having a hard time getting in rhythm because of Carson Wentz. And you know, some people are going to sit there and think that he hit a zinger on me and just act like a check mark trumps reality. But, you know, I feel like the fan base wants to be excited about this move, Josh, and I can't really blame them because I don't have a disposition against Carson Wentz. But are we just going to act like we haven't been clowning this dude ever since he was taken with the 2nd overall pick? Are we just going to act like we haven't been doing that? Are we going to act like this guy didn't throw probably the worst interception I've ever seen last year? You know, are we going to sit here and act like a guy that in 2017 got 2 votes for MVP, all of a sudden 4 years later is that same guy? I mean, how often do we talk about after ACL, MCL injuries that these guys never come back the same? I mean, the arm talent, the athleticism, the size, the intangibles, like John Keim talked about in his article referencing why they chose him, all of that stuff is there, but he's a former number 2 overall pick, Josh. And, you know, a lot of people love slamming RG3. And he definitely failed expectations. And I definitely think Carson Wentz is a hell of a lot better than RG3. But at the end of the day, both of these guys failed their cities. Both of these guys have not lived up to their expectations. And I'm not saying that they're the same player, but I'm saying that they both have not filled up to the aspirations of their original draft status. So when people say that Carson Wentz isn't injury prone, Josh, what is your response to that?
My response is simply when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, who was their starting quarterback? Plain and simple. He is injury prone. And I'm sorry, all these Commander Pro Twitter accounts are trying to say Carson Wentz is one of the best things that ever happened to Washington.
We got our guy, Josh. We got our guy. We're you and I are being pessimistic because we're grounded in reality here. I mean,
yeah.
You think that 2017 was just that great for Carson Wentz, or it only took a season for the NFL to actually figure him out? I mean, the blistering athleticism was there. I'm not going to deny that. All the intangibles there. And his athleticism is next level. It's top 15 athleticism at the quarterback position. I'm not going to deny that. Like I said, go check out John Collins' latest on how they kind of did the process of elimination and getting their guy. They want him to be about 6'3", 220, have that quick twitch, that athleticism. Carson Wentz lives up to all the things that they are looking for in a franchise quarterback. And I'm not going to sit here and say that they aren't allowed to feel like he can be, but to sit here and tell me that I'm not allowed to judge him based off his natural perception and everything that he's done before he got here, are we some healing rehab for quarterbacks all of a sudden? Because last time I checked, we need a savior at this point. We need somebody to come in and absolutely change everything for the Washington Commanders. I didn't know that we were here to turn people's careers around, because that's never been the type of organization that we've been, especially for the last decade or two. So the fact that I'm being insulted or told that I'm wrong for saying he's injury prone just because he's only missed 4 games, I mean, it was COVID. I mean, it was just a plethora of stuff, guys. I want Carson Wentz to succeed just as much as you guys do. And look, that press conference, I mean, he looked the part, Tanya's there, not Dan Snyder, everybody. And, people gave Pete Haley a lot of flack for this, but I loved all of the Indianapolis questions because I was listening very keenly every time he responded. He says that reports are reports. And, one thing that I got out of this press conference, first and foremost, is that this front office loves Carson Wentz. And I'm not talking 1 year rental kind of love. Rivera says that this doesn't stop them from taking a quarterback, but Wentz is their quarterback one, and he would love to see this be a long tenure, and he means that. And he believes that Wentz has the skill set for this to be a long-term solution. And, he talks about how he spoke to people around the league, and he says that what he was told is very contradictory of how things actually happened in Indianapolis. Says that 2 team captains were absolutely dumbfounded by how events transpired and him being traded out of the city. He says that the players know who Carson Wentz is. And to that, I say, go ask everybody in both of those locker rooms how they feel about Carson Wentz. You and I both, Josh, know that if you actually go out there and try to find it, you can see how a lot of these players do feel about Carson Wentz. Sure, he's got some friends, but he's also made a lot of enemies along the lines too. And, he really drove home that the end of their last season was absolutely terrible, and I'm glad that he put some emphasis on that. But, I mean, just because he seems to have humility about it doesn't make that ending in Indianapolis any less horrific. I mean, really, they had a slow start that season and then an awful finish. And that's just not good enough for the Indianapolis Colts and Chris Ballard. Everybody is kind of making this a Chris Ballard thing when I really don't feel like that's fair. I mean, has anybody actually taken a look at the Indianapolis media and how they've reacted to this? I mean, we took the entire brunt of all of his contract money this year. They get draft picks, possible second-round draft picks. I mean, they feel like they won the lottery over in Indianapolis. Why do you feel as if people don't feel like it's fair to judge Carson Wentz off of some of the red flags that have kind of popped up over his NFL career up to this point in both Indianapolis and Philly?
I mean, the stats are there. I'm not really sure why people are questioning or denying that he's injury prone, because it's there. And my thing, let's just backtrack back to what Rivera said, what you mentioned about what Rivera says. I wouldn't be surprised, Parker, if Ron Rivera is just saying all this to make Commanders fans happy, because I don't see that being a long-term deal at all. I really don't. If they can make something long-term out of Carson Wentz, I'm not sure how good it's going to be. Is he going to take this team to the playoffs? Year 1, probably not. Year 2, depending on what acquisitions are made, Probably not. Year 3, I'd say 3 years max. You give Carson Wentz to try to help this team make it to at least the playoffs, because I mean, the playoffs are just the beginning to get to the ultimate goal of a Super Bowl, which,
And I'm glad you say that, because to me, Rivera's enthusiasm it doesn't feel as if he got his franchise quarterback. It almost feels like he's trying to make us feel like this is an upgrade in a sense. It almost feels like an insult to my intelligence. Like I said, I'm not going to sit here and act like our national perception of Carson Wentz wasn't what it was before he decided to join our organization. And I don't think me speaking in a factual and logical sense on everything that's got him here makes me, critical of him, or like I have some type of disposition of him. I mean, he says it's a whirlwind. You're damn right it's a whirlwind, Carson Wentz, because I can't tell you how many quarterbacks in football had a better situation than you did in Indianapolis. The best running back in football, phenomenal coaching staff. And I mean, say what you want about Chris Ballard and management, but apparently he did not live up to the bill. And, with Carson Wentz, man, it's the highs and it's the lows. And, I can sit here and talk about the lows all day long, but they come just as frequently as the highs. And that was one big knock about Taylor Heinicke. It was just inconsistencies in his game. But it's just that Carson Wentz, time after time, makes these egregious mistakes. And, like I said, I mean, sure, he hasn't missed 5 out of the last 6 seasons. I completely butchered that. But he has a hard time staying on the field, and it led to a slow start last year. And, when the team was on his back and he needed to be that franchise quarterback at the end of the season for the Indianapolis Colts and beat the Jacksonville Jaguars at 2-14, he couldn't get it done. So if you can't be the saviors for them in one of the best situations in football, what makes me think that you can come over here and keep the Commanders at bay in the NFC East? I just don't see it, Josh, and I don't understand why other people see it. It almost feels like an insult to my intelligence. And I'll say this. If Carson Wentz is standing tall at the end of the 2022 season, I'll buy his black jersey. I will issue a public apology. I'll eat my crow. To me, there's a difference between rooting somebody and being a realist. And, to be honest with you, Josh, and I'm just going to be blunt about this, I've been watching some of the Hard Knock stuff. One of Frank Reich's biggest thing about Carson Wentz is that he's a good, God-fearing young man. To be honest with you, I don't give a crap about what Carson Wentz does on Sundays other than winning football games, okay? I don't want a Boy Scout. I want a franchise quarterback, okay? And I'm going to leave it at that. And, like I said, if I feel like if Carson Wentz's circumstances were any way different, going any other direction just a little bit, I feel like he's already out of the league. But, for what he's being paid, and, that skill set, I certainly hope Ron Rivera is right, because his job could very well be on the line. And I'm not going to sit here and act like this situation with Carson Wentz couldn't work out either. But, the fan in me certainly hopes that it does. Question of the day for the YouTube watchers in the comments. Is Carson Wentz the splash of the free agency period for the Washington Commanders? And if he isn't the splash, what is the splash that you want the Washington Commanders to make? And something else that a lot of people that say I'm anti-Wentz like to say, Josh, is, well, if you don't like the Wentz move, what would your idea be? I was always in the camp of kind of signing one of these middle-level guys and then drafting either Wills or Pickett. Of course, I've always been in that camp. Go check out our all 22 video. I said it there. I was all about signing Jameis Winston, man. $28 million 1 year, very similar contract to Carson Wentz. He is the number 1 quarterback currently left on free agency, and he's attracting a lot of attention from the Saints, of course, to return there, and Indianapolis. What does it tell you that the Colts would rather have Jameis Winston than Carson Wentz? I mean, really let that sink in. We could have got Jameis Winston on a 1-year rental. In my opinion, he's made a lot more strides in his professional career than Carson Wentz did. I really wish he could have finished out his last season before getting injured with the New Orleans Saints, but good job for Jabbo. Happy if he goes back to the Saints and gets another chance to kind of close that out. But I mean, on the brighter side of things, no guaranteed money past the season for the Commanders. I'm not crazy about the draft picks though. Especially when those picks can turn into guys like Terry McLaurin. And Terry McLaurin is definitely a guy that we'll be talking about when we talk about this cap space that now is being cleared up within the last couple of days during free agency. But like I said, I was cool with signing one of those middle of the pack guys like a Teddy Bridgewater or, definitely not going to say Mitch Trubisky, but I mean, there are a couple, maybe a Tyrod Taylor, signing one of those guys to like a 1 year, $8 million deal, 7. I mean, you wouldn't go anything over 10 there. And then drafting one of these young quarterbacks. I really thought that the Commanders were all in on Malik Willis, and I think if he's there at 11, they'll take him. But I highly doubt he makes it to 11. And now there's reports of, Indy being high on Pickett, and now Baker Mayfield suddenly available. So, I mean, it's been a never-ending quarterback carousel. We could record this pod 3 different times in the same day, and we would get new quarterback news within each time of us recording that podcast. People are telling us, Josh, Wentz is an upgrade, right? And, some charts are saying that we're one of the 3rd most improved team after the acquisition of Wentz. So with the presumption being that Wentz is going to take this team to the next level, I'm having franchise quarterback level expectations for him in 2022. I mean, that's what everybody's telling me to do. I mean, those are the expectations put on a guy like Taylor Heineke, of all people, an undrafted free agent. I mean, Wentz is certainly being compensated to be everything that Ron Rivera is saying that he is. But, to me, Carson Wentz and franchise quarterback are just not synonymous. To me, the only thing that Carson Wentz is synonymous with right now is roster decimation. But do you honestly feel right now that Rivera, this process and everything has kind of gone to fruition? And do you feel like there is like a glimmer of hope, a small spark that he can be our franchise quarterback if all things go right? Or does he get to that level of just being good enough to get into the playoffs? Because like being good enough to get into the playoffs, Josh, isn't the goal. The goal is to win a Super Bowl. I mean, sure, getting to the playoffs is the goal in the NFC East, but that's not a franchise quarterback. What's your take on that?
I'll give him 30%. I feel like it's 30% that there's a 30% chance that Carson Wentz, everything goes right. He stays healthy. He has a killer year, takes the Commanders to the playoffs. I think 30% is a fair percentage to put on what I think the chances are that will happen.
The numbers say that it's an upgrade, Josh. All the analytics guys, they're saying he checks all the boxes. 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions last year. Pretty good year for Carson Wentz on paper. But I don't know many quarterbacks that would be able to mess up a situation like that. Indy, go ahead.
Okay, so let me throw this out there. Everybody's saying it's an upgrade for the Commanders, so on and so forth. If Carson Wentz gets injured or he has a dud of a season, what will the headlines be after that?
Now, on top of that, like I said on Twitter, on top of that, Josh, what are you going to do if week 5, Taylor Heineke's already in the game? I mean, seriously, like, if Carson Wentz goes down in any capacity and is not available, at least for 70% of the snaps, enough for that compensatory pick for the Colts, this is not a win for the Washington Commanders. I feel like they're going to keep him upright. I definitely have some questions at the offensive line, especially after how everything transpired, and we're about to get in that. But before we do, we'd like to take a word with our sponsor, Prize Picks. Make sure you use promo code SSNWFT for a 100% instant deposit bonus match on the Prize Pick app. Download it. It is free. Of course, terms apply. Remember, people, it is you versus the projection, not you versus the players. So join the Prize Picks family today and download the free app and get to it. And, the Washington Commanders definitely got to it on Wednesday, a very busy Wednesday in the front office. Couple stunning moves that sent shockwaves. The Commanders released left guard Eric Flowers and also defensive lineman Matthew Ioannidis. The Ioannidis move to me, Josh, was definitely stunning. The writing was on the wall. But one thing that a lot of people aren't recollecting is that Ioannidis questioned a lot of the coaching back in 2020. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised it took this long. But, I mean, that just shows you his value in this rotation of defensive linemen. A lot of people say he's injury prone, but he played 60% of the snaps last year. And something that's definitely been concerning to me, though, is kind of the trend we've seen with free agency and kind of how Washington's been tampering, because Matthew Ioannidis' agent spoke up and said, we don't particularly care to be lied to our face. That's not the way you conduct business in the NFL. We kind of saw some similar stuff with J.D. McKissick, and we'll get into him a little bit later, but it's kind of some of the misconduct or some of the bad things we're hearing around the league over the last week about how Washington's kind of conducted business at the free agency period. Is that kind of alarming to you?
Not really. I mean,
business is business,
Washington.
Right?
It's Washington. I mean, this news would only come out in Washington that Washington is running a terrible business in terms of how they're releasing players, signing players, J.D. Mckissick and Matthew Ioannidis, those examples. And it's a Washington move.
And, it was definitely intriguing to hear from Settle's camp from JD's camp because, everybody knows how the entire JD thing transpired. But, everybody also knows that Rivera and McDermott have a pretty good relationship. The Bills and the Commanders have a pretty solid relationship between staffs. So definitely surprises me to see that. But, I mean, when I first heard the Ioannidis' agent, when I read his, comments, it definitely felt initially like it was a disgruntled agent. But I mean, really, at the end of the day, this is a business. There is a code of conduct, but at the end of the day, the NFL is a business. And, people can say what they want to about Matthew Ioannidis. He was a legit part of this rotation. Definitely can't stay healthy. But for me, just a critical blow to the depth of the strongest unit, or was the strongest unit on this team, the defensive line. And, a lot like Brandon Scherff, I think next year he will be missed and probably one of the most underrated players that's ever played here. Matthew Ioannidis, we've gotten great value out of him, and he's been an absolute game breaker in multiple instances. And I'll definitely miss watching Matthew Ioannidis play for the Burgundy and Gold. Phenomenal home run draft pick and a very underrated guy in his time here. So thank you to Matthew Ioannidis for the memories and wish him luck as he is signed with the Carolina Panthers. Kind of a reverse Carolina connection there. But I think what made this even harder, and like I said, I was just talking about the depth, Josh, is that Tim Settle has signed a 2-year deal with the Buffalo Bills. It's kind of a prove-it deal, very incentive-based. I'm happy for him, Josh, but I kind of feel as if I'll miss Ioannidis a little bit more. I mean, look, Khan talked about it on his pod. The defensive staff kind of went back and watched some games this year and saw that they kind of underutilized Tim Settle in a lot of senses. He gets an opportunity to go into a winning culture, a win-now roster in Buffalo, and kind of earn his keep. Prove if he was really worth all of that stock that Commanders fans said that he was when they were saying that he was a trade target. How did you feel about Tim Settle signing with the Buffalo Bills, and kind of a critical blow here to the depth of the Commanders' defensive line?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, personally, I like both Settle and Ioannidis, and I think it's going to be some big shoes to fill for the Commanders, losing both Matt Ioannidis and Tim Settle. Two key pieces to the defense, in my opinion, and it's a tough blow, but like you said, the NFL is a business, and Washington probably didn't have the money to keep them both, so had to let them go.
Yeah, they can't really justify spending $4 to $5 million on a rotational tackle, and I can definitely understand that, right? Things internally weren't going well between Ioannidis' camp and the Commanders, as we knew, but I feel like I would have been I'd feel a lot better about the Ioannidis move had they been able to keep Settle, but no one can fault Settle for going to Buffalo and, choosing to chase a ring and prove himself in one of the best NFL rosters today. But don't worry, guys. We re-signed Troy Apke. 1-year deal. Okay, we're good. But I mean, you kind of look around. That wasn't really the only move that was made. Eric Flowers, who's been traded away, traded for. I mean, it's an absolutely crazy, chronological order of events for Eric Flowers here in the Burgundy and Gold, but does save $10 million for the Commanders with his release. Apparently, we don't need guards. Brandon Scherff signs with the Jags, as I spoke about earlier. Brandon Scherff, another guy like Ioannidis, is an absolute grinder. When he's on the field, he's an absolute difference maker. Easily the best player that this organization has drafted in the last 5 years. Say what you want to about Brandon Scherff. Say what you want to about his salary. Say what you want to about his availability. But he was probably the only All-Pro on this roster within the last 5 years, or one of the only All-Pros in this roster in the last 5 years. A true professional. Absolutely. Thank you, Brandon Scherff, for the memories, a lot like Matthew Ioannidis. And check Washington's win-loss record without Brandon Scherff last year. We'll see how often Mr. Carson Wentz stays upright without that All-Pro at right guard. But for me,
agree.
I mean, do you feel like Commanders fans kind of undervalued him? I mean, we all make jokes about his salary, but I mean, he really was, some could argue, the best at his position.
Yeah, I agree. He did a really good job, in my opinion. And quarterback protection is number one in this league, in my opinion. And if you don't invest the money to get a line to protect your quarterback, you're going to be screwed.
And, you look at the Colts. I mean, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly. I mean, they got an all-pro, top 2-3 offensive line over in Indianapolis. Now Carson Wentz comes over here and has Sadiq Charles and Wes Schweitzer at guard. But that did not remain the case for long. At first, it kind of seemed like arrogance. Mitch Tischler said that. I thought that was a great point by him, that, we kind of assumed that guys like Eric Flowers just grow on trees. But they were able to go out and get a pretty good replacement for half the value, Andrew Norwell, connected to the Commanders not long after Flowers' release. Everybody said that the Commanders had a plan, and they certainly did. 5 years with the Jags, former Panther, shocker. 42nd out of 82 starting guards in the NFL last year, according to PFF. Older, but in my opinion, probably adequate replacement. We got Charles Leno at left tackle, Norwell left guard, Rouillet at center, Schweitzer right guard, Cosme presumably at right tackle as well. Tyler Larson re-signed with the organization as well. What would you grade that offensive line, and do you think they're done adding to it?
I'll grade Wes Schweitzer alone A++ because he posts those videos of him with huge weight doing incredible
things. If we're going off athleticism, Wes Schweitzer is a top 2 offensive lineman in the league.
Oh, yeah. You see him in the weight room and how
crazy, man. A big guy should not have balance like that. That's absolutely wild to me.
Like, that stuff, I'd probably kill myself lifting 700 pounds worth of weights. Good grief, man.
For me, man, the Norwell signing definitely made me feel a little bit better. I feel like people were being a little knee-jerk about it, but I mean, the thought of Sadiq Charles playing or being a starter in the league just makes me want to throw up. He spends more time on the bike than he does on the field. And Schweitzer, I mean, look, the organization's invested in him. This is his time to kind of step in and prove his worth and see if he can kind of earn a second contract, a lot like a guy like Chase Rouillet. I was definitely happy to see them get that thing done with Tyler Larson in case, Chase's recovery isn't exactly on par. Overall, I'd like for them to upgrade over West, but I feel like it's a very similar situation in what we see with like Adam Humphries, right? They get Adam Humphries on a 1-year deal. They draft Dax Maline, and they let Adam Humphries go, and they expected Dax to just have a bigger role this year. And that's how things are supposed to be done, just like Kyle said. So I'm cool with giving West kind of a 1-year flyer here and see if he can prove himself at right guard. But those are some awfully big shoes to fill. I don't really know what I'd grade this offensive line either. We'll definitely see moving forward. They're going to have their hands full protecting Carson Wentz, a quarterback that loves to extend the play. But there were some other moves before we get to the big one, a la J.D. McKissick. The team did cut DeShazer Everett, saving $2 million on the cap. Just want to take a moment to say, man, that guy's absolutely going through it right now. I just want to send my prayers out to DeShazer Everett. The team unfollowed him and everything. I'm definitely not a big fan of that. What DeShazer Everett's going through is traumatic, and I hope he knows that a lot of the fan base still supports him in that. I mean, it's absolutely tragic stuff. But the Commanders also did re-sign Cam Sims, $1 million, a 1-year, $3 million deal, $2 million guaranteed. Danny Johnson set to hit free agency. They did submit their right of first refusal qualifying offer to Joey Sly. I think they also tendered kicker Brian Johnson as well.
Yeah, if they get rid of Joey Sly, man.
My God. Probably one of the only upbeat things that happened in Commanders football last year. How do you feel about them retaining Cam Sims? That seems to be kind of a polarizing subject. They've made it very adamant with his camp from jump that they wanted to bring him back. Have you ever really understood the allure of Cam Sims and why he's been here so long? Do you feel like he's kind of trending upward and has earned his place in this wide receiver room? Do you feel like he didn't get enough targets? Like, where's your meter read on Cam Sims returning to the Commanders?
The targets, I think his targets were low. If he gets more targets, I could see him really excelling. But I mean, last year and the year before, I just saw him as an average wide receiver. Like, nothing really stood out to me in any way.
I don't think it's the fact that they love him so much as it's just they love the value. Obviously a cheap receiver that can kind of step in and make big plays, making one of the plays of the year last year, absolutely mossing Trayvon Diggs. I'm cool with bringing in Cam Sims on kind of a short-term, low-money deal. I feel like he can make plays for this offense, but I wouldn't really cut him up as a difference maker. Fan favorite, but I've never really been a big Cam Sims guy myself. It's not because I don't see the talent, but I mean, he's just kind of survived here for a really long time. I really don't think it has much to do with ability as much as it does just the monetary side of things. And, speaking of the monetary side of things, you kind of spoke about Joey Sly. They put in their offer a little over $2 million. Like I said, they tendered Brian Johnson at kicker, and hopefully they can get Joey Sly back in the building because he was a great addition for them. And just all you content creators, I don't give a shit what Dustin Hopkins is doing. I don't care what contract extension he signed. I don't care what he's doing with the Chargers. All I care about is what the Commanders have going with their kicking unit. They also tenured defensive tackle Daniel Wise, center Keith Ismail, and defensive end Rooster. If you're listening to this, help me out. Buinmi Rotimi. That's the best they're going to get out of me. And kind of an underrated loss for the Commanders here. Ricky Seals-Jones signs with the New York Giants. Logan Thomas coming back from injury. John Bates, is he getting more of a workload in 2022? We have yet to see. Do you think that Ricky Seals-Jones was kind of a loss for this tight end room due to all things considered with Logan Thomas and kind of just the lack of depth in general?
If Logan Thomas can stay healthy, we won't miss him at all. I'll tell you that right now, because Logan Thomas is one hell of a tight end, in my opinion. Virginia Tech, former quarterback, by the way, bringing out all the Hokies, Joey Sly, Brian Johnson, and Logan Thomas.
Hey.
But anyways, Logan Thomas is athletic ever since he got converted from quarterback to tight end. If the Commanders can have a full healthy season, 100% from Logan Thomas, we will not miss Ricky Seals-Jones at all. I don't think any of the fans will miss him. Any of the Commanders will miss him at all.
Ricky Seals-Jones made some plays last year, man. That Thursday night football game against the Giants, apparently his play was good enough to earn a contract with them. For me, Logan Thomas is the difference between this being a bottom 5 offense and a top 15 offense in the red zone. And you really hope he can come back and get back to 100%. I feel like if, Bates, not everything, if his progress doesn't come along, Samus Reyes being another guy, I really don't know how things are going with him either. We'll just kind of see. But, there's plenty of guys in the market, Gerald Everett, Kyle Rudolph, free agent, Jimmy Graham. I feel like they'll be able to go to somebody if all things don't click and Logan Thomas isn't back in time. But it's certainly something to monitor. But before we get to the things that the Commanders did do right, I want to take a moment for our sponsor, Homage. Make sure you guys use promo code SSN Sports 21 for 20% off your order for some of the hottest apparel at homage.com. It is spring and kind of warm outside, so get some tank tops and some of the latest spring apparel over at homage.com. Take advantage of our limited time offer. Promo code SSN Sports 21, homage.com. So the things that Commanders did right in Wave 1, Mr. Kirby. Bobby McCain signs a 2-year, $11 million deal with the Washington Commanders. And, it's interesting because you look back last year, end of May, beginning of May, I can't quite remember off the top of my head, Bobby McCain released from the Dolphins. Commanders pick him up. A lot of people love the value on paper. Comes in, has a lackluster start to the season, to say the least. But how much of that can you really put on Landon Collins? I think Landon Collins is a big factor here. We obviously miss out on the Marcus Williams sweepstakes. He signs a 5-year, $70 million deal with the Ravens. Like I said, never had a chance. Cam Curl's excited about Bobby McCain returning. So my question is, why can't we be excited? Near the end of the year, him and Curl really fed off of each other. It was, kind of like they had telepathy almost at one point. Once Landon Collins kind of got into that Buffalo nickel role and kind of embraced not being on the back end anymore because he simply didn't have the ability. And, I feel like this upcoming season, full off season intact, those two are really going to feed off of each other. And I think we're going to see a different kind of situation on the back end. Post 2020 injury for Landon Collins, this unit balled. Post Buffalo nickel 2021 Landon Collins, they balled. And post June 1 cut Landon Collins, this unit will ball. I think this is a home run signing for the Washington Commanders. What did you make of Bobby McCain signing or inking that 2-year, $11 million deal?
I think Bobby McCain, towards the end of this past season for the Commanders, did a very good job. And I think he earned that contract. And I feel like he's trending in the right direction to be a key playmaker if he can stay healthy for this Commanders defense.
It's all about team chemistry, Josh. And I feel like Landon always, it was almost as if they were trying to have to make things for Landon. He never just organically fit into how things worked here. Of course, Landon, had a strong end of the season at the Buffalo nickel position. But when you had Bobby and Cam Curl cooking in the back, man, I mean, that was honestly the best case scenario for the Commanders. And like I said, they're able to get Landon off the books finally and it be cost efficient. Bobby McCain, a very team-friendly guy, very good leader, kind of a turnover machine at the second half of that season. So I think when we all sit back and look at it, look back to him getting picked up last year, May, with the Commanders, and now the extension, I think this is going to be looked back at as a very great value move. And I think this is a great step in the right direction for this safety tandem in the back. And like I said, if Cam Curl's excited about it, why can't we be? And if there's something we don't have to fake excitement about, Josh, that is the fact that J.D. McKissick is returning to the Washington Commanders. You know what they say? You never know what you have until it's gone, even if it's for one business day, maybe. It looked like, a lot like Tim Settle. He was headed to Buffalo on a two-year deal. I think the deal was worth up to $8 million. And it was being reported that the Commanders were not able to match, a lot like Settle. And fans were in an uproar. And, it was funny. You look down the timeline, Josh, what were you seeing? He didn't play well until he was 27. We made J.D. McKissick. He's a third down back. Antonio Gibson is free. These were all absolutely ridiculous sentiments, in my opinion, and they looked even more ridiculous once he decided to return to the Commanders and retract his offer with the Buffalo Bills. How did you feel about the initial fan reaction to J.D. McKissick's initial departure from the Commanders?
The fan reaction, I thought it was kind of unfair because J.D. had a huge workload for the Commanders last season, and when I saw the news as a Commanders fan, I was like, man, this really blows. What are we going to do with Gibson if he starts fumbling the ball, can't take care of the ball? And he announces that he's coming back. And this fan said what they said, and J.D. McKissick's back. So he's back. I'm excited.
Treated like a hero in his return as well. I mean, kind of one of the first instances we've seen, Josh, of a guy choosing the Commanders over a contender. And I think there is a sense of gratitude with J.D. McKissick, realizing that before he became a Washington Commander, probably didn't have much of a shot in the NFL to be a running back to get as much of a workload as he has. And, in my opinion, if Antonio Gibson is free, I think that's bad for this offense. You talk about the ball security issues, and I think if you want Antonio Gibson to get more reps and JD get less reps, you need to be careful what you wish for. I thought the reactions were absolutely ridiculous. How many games last year, Josh, do you think off the top of your head where JD made an absolutely high impact play? I can think of two right now. The Giants game, that huge scat down the sideline. The Falcons game where he won and almost single-handedly making one of the best plays of the year, winning on the road in the Dome. I mean, these are plays that Antonio Gibson was never going to make and could never make. And, not only that, only Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler have more receptions in the NFL over J.D. McKissick. So people could say the whole he's replaceable thing. It's fair, I guess, we want to sit here and look at the analytics of it. But, I mean, for only $7-8 million for an absolute difference maker, for a true scat back on this offense, that is a good price to pay. And sometimes, to be honest with you, Josh, I feel like he deserves more touches than Mr. Antonio Gibson. I mean, I feel like out of the shotgun, I feel like he's an underrated north-south runner. I feel like he's got that explosiveness that Antonio Gibson lacks sometimes. And I feel like his ball security issues are kind of minimal compared to what we've seen from Antonio Gibson. So for the people that wanted JD out of town, be careful what you wish for. But fortunately, we do not have to experience that. So he changed his mind and he is back. So that's kind of where we're at with the climate of Commanders free agency wave 1. So now we kind of look to wave 2. And one of the team's biggest needs, of course, is middle linebacker. And some of the better guys available that we have are, Bobby Wagner, Dante Hightower, Leighton Vander Esch. Actually, he just signed with the Dallas Cowboys, I think. But there's still a plethora of starting middle linebackers in this free agency class right now. John Bostic set to return. Possibly need a tight end, interior defensive line, wide receiver, offensive line. Out of all those needs, Josh, and presumably over a little bit over $17 million in cap now. Where do you want to see the Commanders go in wave 2 of free agency?
Everywhere.
Everywhere as in, okay. It's easy to say everywhere because I just spouted out 5 positions right there. But what position in your opinion takes the most precedence? And who would you seek to be that signing that they definitely need to make?
I would say if you were to make me choose one, because I still feel like everywhere is where Washington needs to focus because they can improve just about everywhere. But I'd say O-line because you have Carson Wentz. That's not going to change. At least I don't think. It's highly unlikely. So get the correct O-line combination to protect your starting quarterback, your presumable week one starter that you paid a lot of money for, so you can get protection off your used car.
Well, used car. What I've always felt like we were leasing Carson Wentz, but that's a good way to put it too. Out of the people on the offensive line, like I said, you got Leno, you got Norwell, presumably, you got Rouillet at center, you got West at right guard, and you have Cosme at right tackle. Who would you like to see the Commanders chase out of this free agency pool? I mean, we have been kind of linked to guys like Trey Turner, some of these former Carolina guys. What offensive linemen in this free agency pool would you like to see them take a swing at?
Well, I haven't really looked much at the market for the offensive linemen. But you did mention Trey Turner. I think he would be a valuable asset to take a look at, if not starting, because I think that would be pretty big if the Commanders could pick up somebody like Trey Turner or somebody like him and have like Norwell, or if I said his name correctly.
Yeah, that's about right.
Just as depth position. Because I feel like depth is just as important as getting big name guys to protect your quarterback. Because if you have one down, next man up. You don't have that next man up. You're switching in and out, rotating positions that aren't natural to that player. So, in my opinion, depth is just as important as the guy you're signing for the offensive line.
And for me, that depth is exactly why I feel like this wave one's been a big loss, because we've lost a lot of depth at some of our best position groups. And speaking of position groups, you look at this offensive line in the free agency class, honestly, not anyone I could really say 100% that would come in and automatically be a better option than Wes Schweitzer. I mean, he's been in the building for multiple years now. He's been coached up. This is kind of his prove it year. So as much as I'm not a fan of Wes, I feel like he should at least get a chance to kick the can. Cosme right tackle is an absolute stud when he played. Chase Rouillet's already got his replacement, Tyler Larson, re-signed as well. Left guard, obviously, we got Norwell coming in, a very healthy, player over the course of his career. And then, Charles Leno, the Iron Man, friend of the show at left tackle, starting left tackle. So I feel like this isn't, what Wentz had working with in Indianapolis, but I still feel like it's a very good core unit. But like you said, they definitely could improve, and we'll see if they do. But, based off of who's available, they were probably at the bottom of my improvement list. Middle linebacker still probably at the top. And, you got a lot of content creators and multiple people saying that, there's a lot of people playing in nickel and, just roll with Cole Holcomb and Jamin Davis this year and, just see what happens. I disagree with that. Go out and get yourself a veteran. But of course, that also depends on how John Bostic's return is affected as well. Tight end, we already talked about it. I'm a big Gerald Everett guy, but I don't think he really fits in and is good enough of a blocker to fit into this offense. But, it's probably going to be a prove year for John Bates as well. They've been high on him ever since the pre-draft process, and he got some looks late last year. Interior defensive line, I can think of a name off the top of my head. I'm a big Danny Shelton guy, maybe a start to Lutulele. Go out and get some of these kind of veteran interior former first-round draft picks. A lot of talent still there, and they can be that rotational guy that I feel like Tim Settle was. And I feel like a guy like Starr is better than a guy like Tim Settle. But we will certainly see if Washington kind of let that thing squander right in front of them. And wide receiver, I want to go and throw out a name out there right now. I talked a little bit about it on Twitter. Wide receiver with the Indianapolis Colts, Zach Pascal. 27 years old, great slot receiver, familiarity with Carson Wentz in Indianapolis last year. Came here during the Gruden regime, former Redskin, but I feel like he's a good body in the slot, has a pretty good rapport with Wentz. Some would say the statistic died down a little bit, but you'll definitely I feel like the team should gravitate toward anything that makes Carson Wentz more comfortable. And I feel like if we're not bringing Adam Humphries back in the building, I feel like Zach Pascal would certainly be a good name to add to this room of wide receivers. So I feel like that should be a name to monitor moving forward. And of course, any former Panthers players. So I feel like the silver lining of the pod here and really of Wave 1 in general is that, after cutting Flowers, Ioannidis, and, the post-June 1 cut of Landon, the Commanders are sitting around $25 million in cap space, and that gives them enough to ink a guy like Terry McLaurin long-term. And you certainly hope that is a deal.
They need to.
They need to. And to me, that should take more precedence than going out and getting a guy like Tyrann Mathieu or Bobby Wagner, or going and sign one of these number 2 receivers. Just take one at 11 and let that be it. But that's our finger on the pulse. That is all things for the Washington Commanders free agency Wave 1. But before we close out on the show here, I just want to say, coming up on this upcoming episode of the Sidelines Washington podcast, we have an absolutely huge announcement. We just put some pen to paper. Very excited to share with you guys what's been going on behind the scenes and roll out with some very exciting new stuff. Kind of tease it on the bunker. Make sure you guys go check out my episode with Mr. Andy Burrows and Mr. Freddie Ham on the bunker. Kind of tease it over there. But the rollout starts this week. This upcoming episode, plan on talking to some contributors about some Carson Wentz. Of course, talking a little bit more about free agency as well. So make sure you guys don't miss this upcoming episode of the Sidelines Washington podcast. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Make sure you check out the Sidelines official website. Check us out on Twitter, 124,000 strong. Sidelines_WFT on all social media. Make sure you click the link tree in all bios, Facebook, Instagram, everything but TikTok, people. Check us out. And, of course, I'm the head of NFL operations here at the SSN. So if you want to join one of the fastest rising sport networks in the country, make sure you send me an email at sidelines_WFT@gmail.com to join the Sidelines family today. Kirby, send us out. Tell us the latest with Kirby on sports, brother.
Now, I'm sure you already know the madness called March, Parker.
Oh, my God. It's been consuming my timeline today, man.
Big upsets. We have UNC beating Baylor. That was huge. Kentucky getting ousted in the first round. I won some money off of that one. Bet responsibly.
Prize picks.
Obviously. Virginia Tech, obviously, getting ousted in the first round. I didn't like that. Tennessee getting upset. That was pretty big, too. Michigan's on a roll. I mean, just March Madness in general. Just had a teaser episode I will be promoting out later tonight for the Kirby on Sports podcast. And, just briefly recapping March Madness as it gets smaller and smaller all the way down to the national championship, and hopefully have some sort of draft coverage here in the near future as well.
March Madness,
KirbyOnSports.com, baby.
KirbyOnSports.com. Make sure you subscribe. You guys subscribe, tune into that as well. March Madness at the college basketball level, March Madness and NFL free agency. And it's just getting started. Like I said, we'll be back next week talking Carson Wentz with an indie contributor. Have a huge announcement. Your balls will thank you. Until then, this is the SSN signing off. Peace.